firstly, what I really wanted to open this discussion with, Ash and Oliver, and maybe we'll start with Ash, is the question of what is the difference between sales and marketing when we think about the EdTech sector? Ash, do you have thoughts on that?
Sure. Thanks, Jeanette. Nice to be with you, everyone, and thanks for having me today. So I guess the key difference or the key consideration in the EdTech sector when it comes to sales and marketing and their respective functions is the fact that they really sit on a continuum. And very often when you're talking about a startup, the roles are played by the exact same person. So you might feel as though you're doing it all. I certainly did. Having said that, if I was to, I guess, describe what marketing is and what sales is, I would say that marketing is the strategy and the understanding, the real process and planning that goes into the details of who your target customers are, what your key messages are, and really what direction the sales team should be going in. And the sales team really, if you have one, should be pursuing the direction that marketing sets. So that's how I view sales and marketing. But as I said, when you're in a startup, you're very much one and the same person.
Did you have anything to add to that, Oliver?
No, I absolutely agree with everything you said, Ash. I think it's not just in EdTech, but it's in tech in general. Sales is definitely converging. Like, back when I was a business development manager at an IT firm sort of 10 years ago, sales was the act of sort of picking up the phone, calling, knocking on doors, and the marketing was like the flyers and the, letterbox drops and all that. Now it's like you can sell products through e-commerce, through a website. So it's sort of quite different now.
Yeah, do you want to expand a little bit more on that aspect, Oliver? Because you really work very much in the B2C space, but you've also got experience, obviously, B2B as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the differences between the approaches that you take when you think about the relationship between sales and marketing when you think of B2B compared to B2C?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think you just sort of have to look at the scale of potential clientele in a B2C environment versus a B2B environment. So in our business, we sell B2C directly to students and parents, and there's just hundreds of thousands in Australia of potential students and parents that you could offer services to. But in the B2B space, we sell to schools. I know Ash sells to universities. There's just there's a few thousand schools in Australia, and there's whatever it is, 60, 70 universities across Australia. So the scale dynamics become important. And so that really affects, how much you can actually actively do selling to a B2C audience. So you kind of have to employ a bit more of an inbound lead approach. And so that's sort of one of the main things.
Let's talk about this inbound lead approach and the difference between that and going out and finding people and fossicking for potential customers, which sort of brings me to the next sort of piece that I really wanted to look into, which is like, how do we build up a strong sales process and a strong structure to take, whether it's what you're talking about, Oliver, like take those leads that are coming in and converting them through. And then after that, maybe Ash will talk a little bit about the other approach, which is really going out and grabbing those customers and bringing them to you.
Yeah, so I think it's quite idiosyncratic. Each sales process is quite idiosyncratic to each product. So whether it's a software product or whether it's, like a publication product. So it's obviously something that you need to decide, on your particular product. But I suppose, broadly speaking, in terms of the inbound strategy we employ, you use marketing as sort of a tool to get your brand out there, to get interest out there, to, reach as many people as possible. And then you sort of try and get leads in as much as you can through your marketing activity. And then for me, the sales process is sort of the tail end of it. Like if it's a big funnel, that's all the marketing. And then the sales bit is sort of that part where you're sort of trying to close the deal, so to speak, if that sort of makes sense.
How often these days, just out of curiosity, how often these days do you pick up the phone and close the deal when you're working in this e-commerce space, or is it primarily most of your customers check themselves out?
Yeah, so we sell a lot of, for example, books. There's no need for anyone to talk to me about books. They can, unless it's like we're at an expo and we have a stall and they want to sort of meet the author or talk about our product and get a scan through. But online, especially with the COVID environment, like in Melbourne, obviously in a lockdown, so no such events. They can read a sample chapter. They can see reviews online and they can check themselves out. But then something that's a bit more like, we also have online tutoring services. That's something where a parent or a student wants to have a conversation with someone and connect and build that level of trust. And it's obviously a more expensive purchase. So that is something where you need a little bit more of that sort of personal sales experience.
All right, we'll come back to that piece, which is building trust, in a little bit, because I think that's really, really key. Ash, do you want to give some tips on what you think is really important when you're building a robust sales process?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the key things that come to mind are really, really understanding your audience. So when you're in the EdTech environment in Australia, as Oliver said before, we've only got 40 universities. So scale is very different here. We're talking about outbound marketing. We're talking about hyper-personalized efforts to strike on key messages that your audience wants to hear. And that might sound a bit academic, but really what we're talking about is knowing your audience so intimately that you're able to pick up the phone, which you will do again and again and again and again, and you will email a billion times the same people and various stakeholders that may be tangential to those people until you find the person who's willing to speak back to you, to respond. So I guess point one around building a robust sales process is research. It's really digging deep and understanding who your audience is, and there's so much research you can do via the desktop. If you have the privilege of being partnered with organizations or institutional bodies that can help introduce you to particular stakeholders, excellent. But if you don't, then Google is an excellent starting point. And I guess just to double click on that, if you were to start if your goal is to create institutional partnerships or B2B sales, then understanding the university's strategic direction or goal is your step one, because that will really underlie everything else or every operation they're under. So if for example, I was working with Vigo, as Jeanette said earlier. So Vigo is a B2B peer mentoring platform. B2B in that we sell institutionally, we set up the platform, and then students are able to engage via that platform and engage in peer mentoring or peer tutoring relationships. So step one was to say, okay, well, what aspects of that platform would resonate with your audience? For many, looking through a university's strategic plan, you determine really quickly whether improving the community or improving peer relationships or improving student experience was high on their agenda. And that would really inform your sales process, because you're not going to go in with marketing messages that don't hit on those specific characteristics or those specific value propositions that your audience wants to hear. So yeah, really understanding who your audience is, researching as hard as you can, and then trying as hard as you can as well to get in touch with them, and not being disheartened in your attempts to reach the right person and to.
I think that's a really important point. The idea of being disheartened is really, really difficult, especially it's the first time going out there and really putting yourself out there, especially if you're a founder, right? For all the people out there who've built a product with their own hands, getting feedback from people can be pretty brutal when you get started, right? But that's really, really important to really shape the message. Is if you're hearing things from your customers, how do you need to craft the message so that the next time you go out there, you're building upon that? Actually, there's an interesting question, I think, which was, I think we're talking a lot about marketing, and that sort of creates the top funnel of the funnel for the sales process. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of some of the steps that you need to put in place to take those top of the funnel things and how to strategically push them all the way through, Ash, especially for B2B at this point? We want to talk about that.
Sure. So I guess the key thing is to, repetition is key. I think the latest stats are that you need to repeat the same message 7 times in order to have it actually register in the mind of your audience. So, oftentimes it's just about that repetitive interaction and doing it with both integrity, yes, but also with gumption. Or like a bit of bravery, So say, for example, your first marketing effort was to send out an email in advance of a major event where you're about to meet a prospective target. So if I was to make it super specific, say I've emailed the head of student retention at Griffith University and said, I understand that you're going to be at this upcoming event. I'd love to meet you. This is what I'd love to talk to you about. I understand that it's important to you because blah, blah, blah. I've seen it in your strategy. I can see it on your profile. Griffith University has an excellent reputation for X. So let's have a chat. So say that's your first marketing effort. Maybe you've also got some collateral, as Oliver mentioned before. Maybe you've got some assets or something pretty, some sort of flyer to go along with it. Here's the easy one-pager. You can take a look, or a video or something to complement and visualize that message. That's done. So that's the top of the funnel. Now you've got the date of the event. You want to make sure that you're super prepared for that event, right? That's your first time interacting with that person, whether or not they've responded to you. So I'm putting them in the funnel regardless of their response, because the reality is, and this comes back to that disheartenment comment before, the majority of the time you won't hear back, especially not the first time. They're very busy people. They've got way more things on their plate than we could ever imagine. That doesn't mean they're impervious to your message. It just means that you didn't hit them at the exact right time, and perhaps with the exact right message, or maybe they just ignored your email altogether. So the event is today. You've met this person, or you've been introduced, or you're stalking their LinkedIn profile so you know what they look like, and you've walked right up to them. So this comes back to that bravery comment I mentioned before, that gumption, and being it sounds terrifying, but this is where you're wearing both your sales and your marketing hat, because especially if you're a small organization, you're the only one to do it. So you've walked up to this person, and you've tried to hit those key messages again. I understand you care about blah. This is what I have to offer you, blah. That's pushing them further down the funnel. Then you might find out that actually, hey, look, I'm not the right person to talk to, but my colleague over there, she is. I'm going to introduce you. That might happen. Or alternatively, they'll say, look, now's not the right time. Or, a whole array of maybes eventuate from this one conversation, right? So depending on what that outcome is, you follow that funnel. So the funnel isn't like this necessarily all the time. It's like this. And back, I don't know if you can see that on the video, but it's back and forward and meandering, and no matter what, you just need to be super agile, and eventually you'll talk to the right person, all because you made those initial attempts, even if the final result is not with the initial person that you targeted. Sorry, David, I think you're saying something, but I can't hear you.
I've been sitting in the background there and listening, and we just lost Jeanette. She just lost her internet connection. So you're going to have me MC you for the remainder of the session. So I'll be much more brutal, all right? So there was a fantastic question here. I'll still try to be polite, right? There was a fantastic question here, which I think is a really awesome thing here, which is, can you define B2C and B2B, please, for me? Oliver, this is your part of the world. Come on. You spend your life in B2C and B2B. Tell me what the difference is, and let's talk about how schools think about it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So B2C just means business to consumer, and B2B means business to business. And what that actually means is business to consumer sells to individuals, so to individual consumers, non-enterprises, and then business to business sells to business. You know, technically, you know, I wouldn't say necessarily schools and universities are businesses, but that's sort of the nomenclature I think that we employ to talk about institutions or enterprises of any sort.
Mm. Sorry, David, you're quiet again.
We can't hear you again. Sorry.
All right. And do you think we need to take a slightly different sales approach when we're thinking about B2B versus B2C, Oliver?
Absolutely. Like I think I was listening to Ash explaining about the research process in terms of finding out everything about your customer, and you just can't do that. It's as I was mentioned before, a scale thing. You just can't do that on every single individual student, because you know it's just the economics aren't there. You're just going to have thousands and thousands of salespeople finding out about every single student, and then you know that's plenty of man hours, and then ultimately you're selling sort of a $50 study guide or whatever it might be, or $50 subscription. It just doesn't work. So typically the sort of value amounts of a B2B sale are significantly higher than a B2C product or service. So that obviously factors into your approach and the economics and the fundamentals of the actual revenue drivers.
Fair enough. And that's a really nice segue to jump to you, Ash, and ask a question there around, obviously you've got experience on both sides, beginning in the sales at the top of the funnel, with the marketing messaging, and now actually trying to close as well. So maybe you could give us a bit of an idea about the interplay between the marketing and the sales teams. And traditionally we don't like each other on either side. I've been on both sides as well. So you want to give us a little bit of conversation about that interplay?
I think it's really important for both sides to try their best to respect each other's knowledge. And I think
that's not going to happen. Sorry.
Well, I think it can happen if they work in tandem, particularly if they're the same person, right? If marketing is done at a higher level, so to speak, it typically involves surveys sent out to target customers, or research, desktop research, etc., insights into the macro environment. Then sales is down and dirty, one-to-ones with your target audience. I'm talking about B2B. I can't speak for B2C here, but that means that your salesperson is directly in front of your customer. So they're going to feel like they know best. Your marketing team, having done all that backwards research and is going to feel like they know best. So ultimately, bringing together these two things and making sure that the communication is clear and shared, that will benefit everybody. There's no way that won't be the best case scenario. It's just about, if you can't evidence to your own sales team from a marketing perspective that what you've got to say is accurate, then how on earth are you going to convince your final target? Same way, reverse.
Go ahead, sorry.
So there's a bit of disturbance, noise disturbance. I'm not sure if it's my end or not, but
I'm perfectly clear for me. I don't know, Oliver, are you hearing anything?
Yeah, I'm hearing the disturbance quite a bit as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So that's the key thing I would say about sales and marketing. If they're different people, if they're the same person, well, you know what? Be hyper vigilant at taking every single conversation that you have in the B2B environment. So that's business to business. You're talking to the person that you want to sell to, and they're going to make sure that their university is brought on board. That person's feedback, their responses to your key messages, everything should be noted down, which is which brings me back to something I should have said when asked about the sales process, which is around your CRM, which is your customer relationship management system, for those who don't know what that is. A CRM is basically your data warehouse for everything sales and marketing, really. But ultimately, it should contain details of every single person that you have targeted, that you want to target, that you failed with targeting, and all the details surrounding each of those interactions. Oliver can obviously speak to CRM at scale in the C-space. The profile within your CRM that you engage with. And then within that, you'd have multiple stakeholders. So maybe your head of student retention, and then their deputy, and then the head of student affairs, or whatever it is. So each of those people that you've interacted with, you keep your notes there. You say, this was the last conversation we had. This is what we talked about. This is what they loved. This is what they hated. And you make sure that those reactions are built back into your marketing world, your key messaging and your collateral.
So let's talk a little bit about the actual sales process. So let's move on for a little bit from the marketing. Let's start talking about, I want to talk about 3 phases. I want to talk about lead generation. I want to talk about that first interaction, and let's talk about that first sale. So these are the fundamentals that you need to do. So let's talk a little bit about the lead generation process. And obviously, Oliver, you've got lots of experience in the B2B space. Firstly, has that disturbance gone? Because if you're getting disturbed, then that's going to be really hard for you to think about these incredibly insightful questions I'm about to ask.
I still have a bit of disturbance, but that might just be me.
Well, that's actually an internal thing, Oliver. We've got no technology that can turn that off.
Yeah,
we'll see how we go.
Unfortunately, how if you had that product, anyone has that product, you got me.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about lead generation. I'm going to ask you to counterbalance B2C, and then we'll talk about B2B in a second.
Yeah, cool. Ironically, I've actually been just doing quite a lot of it today for B2B, but happy to talk about B2C. So, okay. So, look, I think in terms of lead generation, B2C, you really can't go past digital advertising nowadays, because that's obviously extremely scalable and cost efficient. Also, you can look at things such as, particularly in a digital environment, what's called lead magnets, just to get the inverted commas in the camera, lead magnets, which basically is something you offer your potential prospective clients something for free. And they sign up. So it might be an ebook is the traditional example. So an ebook on how to study from home effectively, and it's a free ebook. All I need from you is your name, email address, etc. Any sort of key information that's going to help you in understanding your client base, understanding that client to then further convert them into a client. So you get a bunch of leads that way, and you can promote that through, Facebook, Instagram advertising, Google advertising. I'm not going to go into the mechanics of that because that obviously is quite complicated. But you offer them a lead magnet, you get a bunch of leads, then you can email them. So you can set up an email sequence that's automatically sent. It might include, the first email might include that ebook that you mentioned that they're after, and then the second email might be actually promoting your paid product that you're trying to sort of sell them, whatever that product is, a subscription of some sort, or whatever it is that you're selling, a piece of hardware.
So can I ask a practical question, Oliver? So we've done some programming, we've got some leads. Your first interaction is, at the moment, we in the B2C world, is going to be some sort of automation process, right? Before we sort of try and score that lead, before we hand over to a salesperson to make a call. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think yes, David. But what I would say is, I know this is obviously a very early stage startup audience, is my understanding. And so at the start, it's as Ash was saying, it all blends into one. So really, even that first lead or those first 2 leads, in time you'll be talking about thousands of leads. But those first 2 leads, you just and this is one point I did want to sort of make, is your sales is really very similar to your product development cycle and your sort of product iteration, because, you know, as long as there's some sort of germ or essence of what you want to sort of help students achieve, you can modify your product hugely based on those first few clients. And certainly we've employed that process for pretty much all our products. And it's worked well, because there's no better product developer than the client themselves. I'm not sure if I actually answered your question there, David. I think I went on a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
That's all good. It gave us some insight, which is great. Ash, there's a question for you which I wanted to ask around the university and higher education, and I think you've also worked in the TAFE space as well. What channel in lead generation worked sort of most productively for you? And the specific question from someone in the audience, and I don't have a name on it, sorry, was around LinkedIn and how influential and useful that channel was for you.
It's a great question around LinkedIn. So we're talking about, again, B2B sales and marketing. We're talking about trying to get through to the right person in the university executive space. So maybe a manager or a head of department. Look, LinkedIn, I think, is growing in popularity. I think a lot of academics don't have LinkedIn. I know that from the Wiley side, but from the Vigo side, I would say that they have LinkedIn, but look, it wasn't an effective tool for us, and ultimately email reigns. So email is the short answer, but my encouragement to anyone working in B2B EdTech is exploit every channel that you can. So email, and there's not many. There's email and there's LinkedIn and there's the phone. And I think the phone is the most underutilized channel, because I don't know why people are
in higher ed.
Yeah, in higher ed. I've noticed that people are very, very resistant to picking up the phone. It's a fear factor. They don't want to be rejected over the phone. But I think calling the heads of department and even just hitting their receptionist, it was one of the most effective methods that we used to get to the person that we tried to reach ultimately.
I think also, just to pick up on the phone, even if you don't get through, like we call, you know, many heads of departments at schools, because we sell to schools. Even if you don't reach them on the phone because they're in class teaching or they're in a staff meeting, a team meeting, just the fact that you called in 2021, where email is the de facto sort of mode of communication, is much appreciated.
That's a really important point there as well, Oliver. Okay, so we've got some leads. I think you were saying before, Oliver, that you're trying to automate the first couple of steps to reduce cost. All right. So the next step is we've got someone on the line. What level of proposal am I generating before I get to a meeting, or am I going to a meeting to understand and then generate proposal? What's your process?
Again, it depends on the
I lost Oliver then. Did you, Ash?
Yep.
Can you
Can hear you now.
Go for it again, Oliver.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. Yep, we can.
Yeah. So the question was around, okay, got the lead on the phone, cool.
Yep, we've got the first lead. We're about to go to a meeting. What are we doing? Are we doing a proposal beforehand, or are we going there for discovery?
Yeah, so I think in the B2C space, where you're selling sort of a product that's maybe worth $100 or $200 a year, you're not sort of doing a custom proposal. You're not even really talking to them on the phone. If you're sort of talking about an annual value or a sale in the thousands, low thousands in B2C, then yeah, you could do a formal proposal. But typically it's more about, it's a consultative sales approach, trying to find out where they want to go, how you can help them. And then, yeah, it is ultimately, again, in B2C, it's less, you're not tailoring the product so much to each customer. It's more just kind of a standard product that you sort of deliver and sort of slightly edit for each potential customer. But in the B2B space, you do work very closely. It is more like a partnership type thing. You could develop the product or the way it's sort of offered completely around the way that the school or the university needs you to deliver it. Sorry, David.
I'll ask you the same question, Ash, which is, okay, you've got your appointment. We've had a conversation. What are you bringing to that appointment?
So after you've had your first appointment, you're going to, the first.
No, before we're not at the first appointment. We're coming to the first appointment.
Coming to the first appointment. Sorry, got it.
That's okay.
Look. This really depends. It depends on the format of the appointment. Assuming you've been lucky enough to actually sit in front of your customers and maybe a group of their colleagues, you will be bringing, theoretically, you'll be bringing a pitch deck at the very least, with broad messages. And again, I cannot insist upon this enough. With higher ed, with the university sector, so much information is available online. There is no excuse to come unprepared to these meetings. You don't need your target customer, so you don't need the head of academia for Griffith to tell you exactly what he cares about. That information is available online. So you've come and you've already adapted your pitch deck. We adapted our pitch deck for every single client meeting that we had. So we've already adapted it so that we're using the exact same language that they're using in their strategy or on their, department homepage or in their latest press releases, whatever it is that you're sourcing your insights from. So the pitch deck is already tailored. So yes, you are there to gain more insights and have conversations where you learn, but it would be very, very poor work if you've come unprepared and don't look like you already know the answers that they're about to tell you.
I'm going to be controversial and say I don't agree, but that's fine. I think you should go to the first meeting as a discovery, but you're right, you have to be prepared. But I think that one of the challenges in sales is that you need to have the balance between understanding the customer's need and how your solution fits. So I agree, all the preparation, but I think it's genuinely, my sales strategy, I genuinely like to ask what the objectives are, but I like your approach too. I'm just giving people an alternative. We're going to let's try and get really specific here, right? We've got some people here who are looking for customer number one. They're looking for customer number one, Oliver. Come on, give us the Oliver Kransy 3-step process that I need to get my very first customer who's going to trial my product, pilot my product, buy my product. What am I doing?
Yeah, look, if for customer number one, just look at your network. Like I would honestly be organizing a coffee with Mr. David Linky over here, because he has probably the biggest network that you directly have access to. Unless you have particular connections, and I'd be sort of asking him for a school introduction. Sorry to throw you under the bus, David, but realistically, that's what I would do.
Costs more than a coffee. That costs more than one coffee, Oliver. I'll give you the tip. But anyway, we'll go with that.
All right, a beer. I think.
All right, now we're in the same market. We're in the same ballpark.
That's right. Yeah. Look, and I think I've done as much. In fact, I've utilized you in that way in it before. So yeah. So it really is sort of network, because a warm introduction for the first client when you don't really have that much sort of a reputation or that much to sort of, you've just got yourself and your passion. You just need that first foot in the door. It's like the cliche thing of getting that first job as well. Like just get foot in the door. Don't be afraid to leverage connections. That is really how the world of business and sales often works. So that is really, for the first client, my advice. And you will know someone, particularly nowadays, we're all sort of connected, and there's LinkedIn and we're networked. There's got to be someone that you know, and don't be afraid to call them or pick up the phone or send them an SMS is my actual advice for client number one.
I'm going to ask you a question. The same thing. We're looking for client number one, Ash. Am I asking them for money? Am I asking them to pilot my product? Am I asking them to trial it? What am I trying to achieve in customer number one?
this is very contingent upon the product, obviously, and whether your MVP is ready. I would say the pilot is the if you're looking for customer number one and you've got a B2B solution, I think asking for anything more than a pilot, a free pilot at that, would be very gutsy. I mean, sure, if it's there's been all sorts of solutions in the last 12 months since COVID that have been purchased off the bat. I remember there was yes, when COVID first hit and every university was asking the same question: how on earth are we going to assess our students? And a company came out with I cannot remember the name of it, but basically it was an online. What's the word, David? Help me.
Proctoring, online exam proctoring.
Yeah, exactly.
Or invigilation. If you want to be really impressive, you throw the word invigilation out there. I go with proctoring because I don't know if I say invigilation correctly.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you do, and that's exactly what I was thinking of. It was an invigilator, and they were able basically to watch you while you were being assessed via the internet, which is very controversial and very uncomfortable, but at the same time was the only way they could ensure the integrity of the assessment. So universities were shelling out abominable amounts of cash because they needed this product so badly. Now, we didn't have that privilege when we launched Vigo, but yes, pilot for free is definitely what you're looking to achieve. And I would say, Oliver and I have both said this word: partnership is what you're after. You want to make sure that the outcome of your pilot is one based on mutual benefits that both you and your partner can then go on to demonstrate and use again and again and again. We instituted this pilot, we achieved these outcomes. Everybody else, you want what we've got.
And Oliver, do you want to just comment around this idea of what partnership actually means in this context? So if we're going along and we're going to pilot our product for free, what does the partnership model look like that you'd like to achieve with that customer?
Yeah, good question. And again, it's case by case. But what I would typically seek in a partner client or a partner is someone who's not afraid to. But firstly, you need sort of an open mind, because you have to realize that version 1 of your product is not going to be good. Like, there's a famous quote by Reid Hoffman, who started LinkedIn, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, if you're not embarrassed by version 1 of your first product, you've shipped it too late. And I think that's absolutely true. And so, and there's a lot of schools, and I'm sure universities, that aren't open-minded. There are people who just want it to work and expect it to work, and they aren't open to the sort of the iterative process. So the first thing I want in a partner is someone who's open-minded, someone that I can work with. So it's almost like you're hiring someone for that collaborative job, someone you want to brainstorm with, someone who is looking to improve things in education in a positive way, and they see you as sort of a way they can leverage you and your product to achieve some of their objectives. Again, because it is case by case, I can't get too specific, but basically someone open-minded, someone who's willing to give you a go, someone who has a little bit of power and control over the institution to some extent. Having said that, even sort of a lower level staff member can pilot something within their little classroom or whatever it is. But I think those qualities are more important than like, for example, a school with a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like, that's someone who's open-minded at a small regional school is far more exciting to me than the former.
Did you want to add something in there, Ash, as well? Because I want to deep dive into a little bit more into partnership in just 1 second. Did you want to add something else on that?
No, I think Oliver said it really well. I guess to sum it up, it's a discrete, a partner with discrete objectives. So you both know exactly what you want to get out of this test, of this pilot. Someone with perhaps a discrete sample of students. So whether it's a class or a department or whatever it is, they are the ones that are being tested, and you're going to, test them from start date to finish date. And yeah, absolutely couldn't agree more, Oliver, on that innovation or open-minded co-building sort of mindset, because without that, it's just an upward hill battle. Yeah.
This is a question which has come from the audience, and we're going to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it in a slightly different way. And that is, I want to go back to something that you both mentioned, and I think it's incredibly important. And that is, I think your free pilot and partnership has to be with the actual same type target customer. You want them to be focused on target customers. So you don't just do a pilot outside of your ideal customer base. It's still got to be very much connected to who you want to see as your customer long term. So that's really important. So this is a really important point. I want to ask you to comment on this, Oliver, if you don't mind, around free pilot and this level of co-investment and what that might look like, because potentially customers and schools are very much in this realm, don't really value free.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, again, it is, I know I say this time and time again, but it really is case by case. We've done initial client partnerships where I've been extremely insistent that they have to pay something, even a nominal amount, because I think psychologically that can be quite important. In other cases, I think in schools, it's sort of the way things are done in schools typically nowadays is a free trial. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a full trial. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a trial for an extended period of time, but it's a discrete, like Ash was saying, sort of discrete, like 2-week trial where we're dedicated to this. We're investing. Like, look, the reality is, David, the school or the partner, they're investing their time, which is ultimately money, right?
That's a really important point. The co-investment doesn't have to be money.
Yep.
The co-investment could be, and I would encourage everyone who does this, if you set up a pilot with someone, then you should take it as formally as a sales contract. So you should write up a memorandum of understanding. You should list the activities that you're committing to do, that they're committing to do. And if you can do it, I cannot tell you enough, you will save yourself time. If they won't commit to metrics of success, do not progress with the pilot. You must have, a pilot is not a delay in the sales cycle. It is a beginning, and it's an integral part of the sales cycle. So if that potential customer that you're working with, either the person you're talking with or the institution that they work for, whether a school or university or TAFE, are unwilling to sign a memorandum of understanding that says, we are giving you this, and you get rid of the term free. You put a price in it, and you discount it down 100%, you give them an invoice for $0, that don't accept the pilot that says, hey, we'll just try it in a classroom. I would also argue as well, your pilot should have a very strong structure. I would suggest that it needs to be long enough to show evidence of traction, and also it needs to show what's the language I'm looking for? It needs to show that they're committed to the process as well. I'm also going to go, and this is a really nice segue. We've made a sale. We've got to a customer, whether it's a free trial or whether it's a actual paid customer, would be fantastic. That would be awesome. Does the sales cycle finish? Ash, does the sales cycle finish once the customer's got an invoice and paid?
No, absolutely not. I mean, your nurture campaign and you're making sure that your customers are happy forever. If anything, it's just the very beginning. In the B2B landscape that
I'm very excited. You use the word I use, and I feel really, it's the very beginning of the sales cycle when the customer has said yes and paid. Let's spend next 3 hours talking about the beginning of the sales cycle, because that's, in my view, where it starts, right? So please, no, I don't think I've had to even pay you for that. You just came out natural. I'm really excited now. So yes, the beginning of the sales cycle. All right, let's go.
Look, legitimately, I mean, once you've got that paying customer who's put down their commitment to typically a 1-year contract, it is your responsibility then to continue to secure the longevity of that contract, A. B, to make sure that the product that you have provided is doing what you've promised it will do, because either A, they won't sign, and B, that, you know, you're lacking integrity if you're just promising things and not delivering. So it'll reflect very badly on you. And Jeanette said this the other day, but the reality is in this space that you burn a bridge once and you've burnt it with everyone. You know, your name is tarnished. So you must honor your contractual obligations, obviously, but really, you know, take pride in your product and make sure that it's achieving the outcomes that you've promised it will. Whether
there's a question here very much related to this, so I'm going to put it up on screen and we're going to have it. Good luck, but let's see how we do this, right? So given a free pilot for B2B in the university SaaS platform, what's the most effective way to collect feedback in order to display the evidence? I'm going to change it to evidence at the end of the pilot. Do you have some insight to that, Ash, that you can think about?
The most effective way of communicating efficacy and evidence of the pilot. Look, you should never wait till the very end of a process to have evidence. You should be tracking your evidence all the way along, and everyone who is part of that contract should be on board with, you know, where you are at week 1, week 3, week 6, etc. So it's not a, hey, we've started and, oh, now we're looking at the end. It's, you know, otherwise they're not actively involved, which, to your point, David, on that, you know, that final point that Oliver and I hadn't mentioned yet was, you know, making sure that investment on their side, whether it's time, money, or, you know, just taking the gamble on you, because, you know, academics or people who work in the university sector are very busy people. They're not going to run an experiment for fun. They're going to do it because they actually want to see an outcome and to using that outcome to justify further behaviors or activities. So if they're not invested, then, you know, having evidence at the very end of the process isn't going to convince anyone anyway.
And to that questioner, I would argue that you probably know the metrics that show success for your product, so you should try and build those in. Did you want to add something else? Sorry, go Ash, go ahead.
I think those metrics will be established from the very beginning. You'll know what metrics, yeah. That was that objectives thing, sorry.
Did you want to add something in there, Oliver? Same thing about the metrics?
No, I was actually going to say exactly what you said. It's to your point of you should know and agree with the customer what they need to see and what you need to deliver in order to hit those sweet spots for them to continue.
Okay, so now I actually jumped over something. So I was stepping into Jeanette's shoes while she lost connection. I forgot one incredibly important thing, which is a question around how long is this sales cycle? We'll start with you, Oliver, seeing that you're in our spotlight right now. How long do you expect this sales cycle, typical sales cycle, to last for a school?
For a school. So this is one of my key takeaway 3 points is you have to learn and understand the seasonality of the sales cycle, particularly with the B2B process. So schools typically have, like, it's rare, like schools will pilot and try a product sort of potentially at any time, although they'll often say, oh, I'm busy this term, I have exams, let's try term 3, we'll start the pilot. So you have to sort of understand what they're going through. And obviously the terms and the holidays, you know, there are basically 40 weeks in the year that you can really sort of actively be selling to schools. And then sort of you have to understand the dynamics of when school starts, the back to school period, you know, exam revision period. So to answer your question, the seasonality aspect is really important, and that sort of dictates the sales time frame. So it really depends at what stage of the year you start selling to when you're going to sort of see that purchase. Again, it is idiosyncratic on your product versus the B2C space. Just real quick, you can have an instant sale. Like there's, you know, it can be immediate.
Yeah. Ash, did you want to talk about what you think is the sort of typical sales cycle length for the university, higher education and TAFE space?
Yeah, I think it's also on my 3 key takeaways, Oliver. Definitely, 9 to 12 months is what you should expect for a B2B.
9 to 12?
9 to 12 months. Yep.
Okay.
And I think going in there with an expectation of less is ambitious, of course, and maybe you'll get lucky. But yeah, you have to be prepared for that, because obviously you need to budget accordingly.
I'll just make a comment around K-12 schools where I've spent a long time making sales, and take up Oliver's point before around the seasonal component of selling to schools. So yes, he's right. Schools have 4 terms. Everyone sort of knows that process. In many schools, the buying decisions are made in term 3 in the school year, because they are doing budgets for the next school year in that period of time. But don't exclude or don't forget how incredibly useful the last 2 months of the school year are for making sales. So it's really, really common for schools to have leftover budget, or what do they call it, underspend, I think might be the right technical term, where they've budgeted, I don't know, I'm picking a number, $100,000 for the library. In fact, they've only spent $80,000, which means they've got $20,000 left, and they're going to go and pull all that money and go make a purchase. So a really common thing that you'll see big education companies provide, if you've got the cash flow to be able to manage it, is to be able to do what's called buy now, pay later, so that they can begin implementation at the end of this school year for the next school year. And it's just a great way of pulling through those sales. And what you'll typically find is they've got leftover budget and they may make those purchase decisions. So the sales cycle, I think, is pretty heavily decisions are made in sort of term 3, and term 1 and term 2 and term 4 the year before are the introductory phases. So sort of keep those in mind. And you'll also get a big spike in the beginning of the school year as well. So we've got about 5 to 10 minutes left, and there's a whole bunch of questions that I want to ask. So why don't we rapidly run through 3 or 4 of these questions so that we can get people with answers to the things that they're wanting to know. So why don't we just make a little change to the screen here and put me down here so that you're in the spotlight, and then I'll go away and we can go and ask. Okay, here's our first question. When making your first sale in B2B with universities, how did you determine a fair value price for the product? Ash, that feels like it's a question for you. Good luck, off you go.
Pricing, it's the impossible question. A, it has to make sense for you. B, don't discount the concept of government grants. If there's a grant available, again, bringing that concept back of a partnership, work in partnership with your client, your prospective client, and see if there's a grant that can help them out, and then charge more and receive some from the government and some from the client. But the pricing is something that has to work for your business. And if they're the pilot customer, then we're talking about very, very basic figures and round figures. Don't complicate it too much. That's what I would argue. But there's no golden way of knowing the answer on pricing. Sorry.
Well, that's a whole nother segment. That's another 3 days of science to talk about pricing. Yes. Did you want to make a comment about that in experience? What I'm interested in your experience, Oliver, what do you think is a price point that the B2C market are comfortable with without, an incredible hoopla around buying it? And then maybe if you wanted to comment around the B2C space as well.
Yeah, again, I know I've said this so many times, it is really case by case. There are students with extremely, in the B2C space, with extremely wealthy parents. And there are students with parents that are lower SES, and so you really have to know who you're talking to. So that's the first point. The second point I'll say is what I've found in education in the B2C space is particularly knowing the demographic that you're selling to. Parents will find a way to purchase educational resources for their children. I've seen examples where it's the #1 priority for some families over and above, even honestly, I've seen nutrition. And so you have to be very cognizant of how important the thing you're selling is and don't be exploitative.
Okay, fantastic. Did you want to add anything in there, Ash? And I think actually, sorry, I think I started with you, didn't I? Sorry. All right, so now we've got, look, why don't we use this as an opportunity to make our 3 key points. So, Ash, why don't you give us the 3 things that you want this audience to take away from selling into the higher ed space?
All right, I prepared these earlier and now I've forgotten what they are. So quickly go backwards. And of course, at this very moment, my dog has decided to squeak uncontrollably on her toy. I'm so sorry.
That's that's a toy. As long as it's not the bark, because I was like, what is that noise?
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Actually, just to quickly, I guess, round off on the price thing. Using a per student or per student per head price is probably your best bet. Anyway, the 3 key takeaways. Here we go. Expect a long sales cycle. Now, both Oliver and I have mentioned it. It must be true. I say for B2B, no less than 9 to 12 months. Capture evidence of efficacy. That's my second point. So word of mouth is still, for many, your best marketing tool. If you have evidence of efficacy early on and can share that with the wider audience, then, you know, you're laughing. You're just so much better prepared. You can integrate it into every piece of marketing collateral, your audience, do your research. And when I say know your audience, I mean know the key stakeholders. And often within a university setting, you've got the buyer, you've got the decision makers, you've got the influencers, and you've got other stakeholders that come together into this decision-making team. So know your audience and don't give up. If one of them says no, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to say no. So just keep going.
Fantastic. Oliver, what are your key 3 takeaways?
Well, I think we'll start with number 2, because I think Ash and I share that in common. And so when selling to schools and universities, it can often take 12 to 18 months. It's also imperative to understand the sales timing cycle and seasonality in your sales cycle. And number 1, sales and product development are often closely related. I made this point already. Sales meetings in the early stage, your first few meetings, your first few sales meetings, they're an opportunity to iterate your product based on real client feedback. Listen way more than you pitch. Then number 3, when you're selling educational products or services, you must always act with integrity. Your reputation is everything, and that's not like a hokey sort of thing to be like a good moral person. That is really important, and there is it's a small community, and in education, and so you have to act with integrity. It's absolutely paramount.
Fantastic. Thank you both so very much for giving us some fantastic insights into the selling process in the B2C, B2B school and education market. Thanks very much, Ash. Thank you very much, Oliver.